Welcome to the Audiobook Lovin Podcast, discussing all things audiobooks with the authors that write the stories and the narrators that perform them. Brought to you by Viviana, Enchantress of Books.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Season 5, Episode 6 of the Audiobook Lovin Podcast. Today, I am chatting with narrator Oscar Reyes. Oscar, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
Hello, I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me.
I'm excited to talk to you and get to know you better. So with that in mind, let's start by having you tell us a little bit about yourself, how long you've been narrating, and how you got started.
So I'm from Chicago, but I'm based in Los Angeles now. And I think I've been doing it technically for about 3 years. So I started in the summer of 2020. My first narrating gig was with the Thornchapel series by Sierra Simone. And I've kind of been doing it ever since. So yeah, I've been narrating for 3 years. In terms of how I got into it, I'm an actor by trade, as well as some other things that I also do on the side. But in Chicago, I was doing a lot of theater. And I had a friend who I was doing a play with, and she was talking about her career as a narrator. And I kind of have one foot in the literary world as well. So I had interest in it. And she was like, yeah, it's great. You should totally look into it. I moved to Los Angeles, and then the pandemic hit, and I was kind of looking for something that I could do and something that was a little bit more remote. And the opportunity came along, and I kind of leaped in, and I've been doing it ever since.
Nice. Yeah, the pandemic was sucky as it was, and as tragic as it was. Looking at silver linings, there's a lot of folks that figured out where their passions lies, were able to come up with their own entrepreneurship. And a lot of folks were like, hey, I can do this audiobook stuff. All right.
Yeah. 100%.
You mentioned being an actor and on stage. How have you taken those skill sets and put it behind the mic? Because there are two different skill sets that kind of fall into place in between.
Yes, they are a different skill set. I think in terms of how my experience as an actor plays into my work as a narrator, it has a lot to do with putting myself in the position of the characters that I'm reading. I think I really kind of pride myself on being able to tap into the headspace of the characters that are being narrated. And that, I think, is a skill that carries over from acting, really kind of being somebody different than you and making it feel real or sound believable. But yeah, the skill set is a little bit surprisingly different. The actor's skill of reading a text is something that is useful, being able to look at something and think about, well, what's the subtext and what does this actually sound like and how would this be believably delivered? That all kind of plays into it. But yeah, normally actors aren't reading so many words. As an audiobook narrator, you're definitely in a position to spend a lot more time talking than you probably would. Even if actors love to hear the sound of their own voice, narrators are using that a little bit more.
Oh, I knew a few people like that. That's for sure. So also with narration, and you are playing all the parts while being on stage. You're just that one character, unless you're playing a bipolar or someone that multiple personalities.
Right.
So how do you go about selecting those different voices and cadence to the characters once you've been cast in a book?
Yeah, I think it kind of depends on the book and it kind of depends on the character. I think the central male protagonist, depending on the book, you can kind of land on that pretty easy. There are a couple of different varieties. I kind of have a little bit of a trend of doing sad boys, which is, it feels right. It feels in my wheelhouse, I suppose. And then in terms of finding the characters that are different than that, you just kind of track what feels right based off of what you know about the character and based off the sort of purpose they play in the story. All these different characters kind of do serve a narrative function. So knowing that, I think, is useful and helpful. If the guy's a little bit of an antagonist, if he's a villain, you kind of can figure out how that sounds. Are they cocky? Are they plotting? Like what's their vibe? And once you figure that out, it's relatively easy to find something that feels natural for the character. The hard part is tracking it throughout the book, because sometimes you'll start and you have like this character in chapter 1 and they don't come back until chapter 30, and then you have to be like, what did that guy sound like? Or if there are a lot of different characters on a single page or in a single chapter, that's a hard one, because you have to shift gears really fast and kind of go seamlessly through those different lines of dialogue. It can definitely be a challenge.
Or my favorite when that guy just pops into the diner to just meet up and say something, but it's the
Sure.
best friend of one of them, and then you're like giving them something, a cadence or whatever, and then someone forgot to tell you that they're also the hero in book 5 of the
Yeah.
series, and you're going, okay, what did I do there?
Yeah. It's funny how that sort of stuff comes back to haunt you a little bit, but it definitely can. You make choices, and then all of a sudden you're doing a full book from the perspective of a character you did a one-off line from, and you're like, oh well, I didn't know I was marrying myself to this idea. That's definitely something that goes down.
Yeah, but do you keep your sound clips for those different kind of characters so that you can then refer back to them?
So if I'm recording from home, I have them all somewhere. I'll have to go find them and figure that out. But sometimes I'll record in the studio, and that's a little bit harder because I don't have access to all of those files. Finding access to a main character voice is, relatively simple. You just pick a file and click play and be like, okay, yeah, that's what that guy sounded like. But some of the other ones can be tricky.
What are some of those like maybe major or subtle differences between recording in your own studio in the comfort of your own home, and going out into a studio and having to record outside?
The biggest weirdest thing is probably scheduling, just because, if you're recording in a studio, you kind of have to figure out what their availability is because they're recording multiple books and multiple people, and narrators are coming in and out for different projects. So you're a little bit more beholden to their availability. And when you're recording from home, you can do it whenever. I live in an apartment building. So even with my booth and setup, there's always like some sort of noise that can make it really challenging. So I usually end up recording late at night when like the whole building is asleep and the street is quiet, which I can do if I'm recording from home because it's my schedule, it's my apartment, it's whatever. But at the same time, then you have to carve out chunks of time every evening, 11 to 2 in the morning, just sitting in a booth recording audiobooks, which is fine because, my life has the space for that. But I can imagine that being challenging if I had kids or a dog or a partner, if
Heck,
in
even
any
a cat, okay? Even a cat.
sure. Like any of it just kind of complicates it. And my
Yeah.
booth is, my setup for home recording isn't as expensive and fancy as the one in the studio. So that's kind of different. There's a little bit less self-consciousness when you're recording at home, and if you make a mistake or, you're hungry, you can just take a snack whenever. Because you're not paying for those studio hours. It's a little bit like, I'll just, I'm tired of this. Let me be done for tonight, which is great. You can't really be mad at that.
Yeah. So when you're at the studios, is it just like I'm thinking because there's a lot of times publishing houses will have like different silos, so they'll own studios even though home base is in New York, they'll own stuff in California. So are you always editing, the recording on your own in these studios, or do you have a director or producer there saying, yeah, no, let's do that line again?
Yeah, so usually the I'll go in and the person like running the booth and running the session will listen, and they'll be like, that sounded a little weird. Let's get another one of that. Let's get a clean one of that. Or that actually is supposed to be this character's voice. Let's do that again. But they're not really offering as much direction. They did I remember getting some helpful tips when I first started, because I'm a little bit of a fast talker and I'm a pretty fast reader as well. So, especially when I got started, it was a couple of like, hey, yeah, you don't have to rush. Take your time. You can slow it down. Enjoy the words, blah, blah, blah. But they're not really giving a lot of direction most of the time. And then I've done some audiobooks for larger houses, usually outside of the romance genre, and they'll have directors, and sometimes you'll get a lot of direction. So that can definitely be a little bit of a more intensive process. The interesting thing about that is when you're working with the director in the session, you usually have a lot less pickups. Because they're able to catch stuff, they're able to listen, they're able to adjust on the fly and do a quick session of like, let's hit this again really fast when you're wrapping up and things like that. So yeah, I mean, and they're a little bit different, but
Mhm.
if the publishing house is based in New York or somewhere else and you're doing it remotely, usually it'll be like a Zoom session, like the director will Zoom in or what have you.
Mhm. Okay. Yeah, I think a lot of times because of the pandemic, Zooming some of these sessions, whether it's for duet narration or producers or directors, has also been a thing. And now,
Mm-hmm.
and people did not realize that if you were doing a duet or multicast, you would like fly everybody out, or everybody would have to fly out and meet in the studio and take turns, and now you're in and now you're out, and everything now is electronically.
Yeah.
And I know that some production companies are starting to do duet narration back in, like, having the two of you, like the lead hero and the lead heroine together, or the main characters together in a Zoom or in person.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, these are actors, they should be able to do it without the person.
Yeah. Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on that as a stage actor as well, being able to, I mean, I understand it's when you're off playing off each other is
Mm-hmm.
definitely different. That I get. I mean, it's the same thing like when you're talking to your best friend on the phone versus in person. I get that.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
but do you feel like you could totally do it without having that other person and have it still be an awesome production?
I think so. I mean, like, it's interesting because when you do it, I guess duet is when you're both in the same session together. I've done that once or twice, and it's all been via Zoom. And it's cool to kind of not be the only voice in the cell, so to speak. That's nice because it does make it a little bit less lonely. It does feel a little bit more collaborative. But process-wise, it is different. I feel like when you're doing it on your own, I don't think it necessarily diminishes the project. I feel process-wise, it makes things a little bit more casual, a little bit easier, just because you're in this booth and you're reading these things and it can be very intimate, it can be,
Oh yeah.
especially considering the genre,
Yeah.
it's definitely the sort of thing that, if you're not used to being intimate as a performer with another performer, it can be a challenge. So it kind of has its pros and cons in both. I feel I'm a little bit less self-conscious if it's just me in the booth and I'm just doing what I've got to do, and I can go in, I can get it done, and it's chill. If I know that I'm going to be working with another narrator, I'm a little in my head. Like, how could you not be, you can be a little self-conscious. You could be a little bit like, oh, well, I'm in a different sort of professional mode than I would be otherwise.
Yeah.
But I've been very lucky that, the narrators I've had the opportunity to do that sort of work with have all been very great and a lot of fun. And sometimes it makes for fun little like bonus content. I did a book.
With Wesley Sivan, right?
Yes, and we had
Yes, I
like the
saw that. I was like,
outtakes.
"Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, talk to
so that
that."
was fun. That was a fun little thing because there is a little bit of that back and forth. There is
Yeah.
a little bit of that sort of
Mhm.
just not teasing, but if somebody
Well,
makes
you're
a
playing
mistake,
off
like
each other.
exactly, there's energy there. So there's definitely value for that, and I think I can imagine listeners appreciate that sort of like peek behind the curtain. That's a lot less interesting when it's just me like saying the same sentence over and over again. Like I could definitely see that being a little bit more fun for people.
Oh yeah, no, we do love our bloopers, regardless if it's
Hmm.
solo
Hmm.
narration or in duets. With duets and having each, individual character have their own person, specifically when it comes to the main point of view for the main characters, it's definitely getting more and more popular. And
Hmm.
the authors are looking into it. Cost associated, of course, what that means it's going to be a little bit higher because of time and zooming and all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
Which is also where the conversations are being had now within the authors of, oh, well, so and so said it has to be done in person, and or they're like, we got to Zoom, and I'm like, not technically, but
Yeah.
I'm like, this is what would look like. And so I've had mentioned that about there's going to be a little bit more of a chemistry, and hopefully if the narrators like each other
Yeah.
and hit it off, because otherwise awkward.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
but I did hear that clip that you were referring to with Wesley, and I'm like, oh, that sounds like fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
They were having fun. I love it when you guys have fun recording a book,
Yeah.
because it just kind of there's something in the energy, like you were saying before, that just comes off and into the waves, and when we hear it we can tell. oh, they
Oh,
were
for
having fun
sure.
with this and
Yeah.
things like that. Yeah. So it's always kind of think interesting to kind of have that dialogue of where if there's preferences or not. And it's interesting too that you mentioned that speaking faster.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you find that that's because you're bilingual?
I would say I don't know if I would call myself entirely bilingual. I
Me
speak
neither, but
Spanish. My Spanish I always say is conversational,
me too.
so I can read Spanish very easily.
Mhm.
I can comprehend it. I can say it. My accent isn't awful. It's a bit Mexican American, as opposed to like puro Mexicano or something else. But would I call myself bilingual? I mean, I don't think native Spanish speakers would call me bilingual. You know,
Hey, whoa.
I can understand and I can communicate, and if it's
Mhm.
written, then I can say it.
Okay. Yeah.
If I have to like talk on the fly or improv in Spanish,
Mhm.
it gets a little bit hairy there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's similar to you in the sense of I do say yeah, I'm bilingual. I wouldn't be like if you do not take me into an executive's office to translate,
sure, sure,
um,
sure,
or a doctor's office. I'm gonna have to Google some of these terms. Um,
totally.
but yeah, and reading, you would definitely have it more up on me because I'm like los pollitos
Okay.
dicen pío. Okay, because it's phonetics,
Yeah, yeah,
but I'm also first generation American,
yeah,
in my household and stuff like that. We were very Americanized and,
yeah.
Spanish inside the house and English outside the house. And man, does it mess with my brain sometimes when I'm thinking in English, but that one word
Yeah.
busses out with in Spanish or the other way around. And I'm like, how do you say gates in Spanish?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean,
And
I think that's
fence.
hard. It's hard because, like, I'm somebody that is very much word focused. Like, I really pride myself on communicating via language. And so the fact that I don't have access to the same vocabulary in Spanish that I do in English, it's frustrating. And then I feel very self-conscious. And then, like, I doubt myself. Like, I'm not me because I get shy. I get like really reserved because I'm second guessing everything. So my Spanish is better if I've been drinking, because there are less inhibitions and I'm a
Yes.
little bit less concerned about sounding stupid or using the wrong
Hmm.
word or not conjugating the verb correctly. You know what I mean?
Oh,
I do my
absolutely.
Duolingo every day. Like,
Okay.
I do my Duolingo Spanish every single day. I got a 5 on the AP test. Like, I tested out of Spanish in
Yeah.
school all the way up, but I'm first generation on my dad's side. My mom's side, my mom was born here, but her dad was, born in Mexico, and her mom was born here, and her mom was born in Mexico. So on my mom's side, there's a little bit longer of a line, but on my dad's side, I'm first gen, But our house was very English. We were speaking English in the house, That's just kind of how I grew up. But the Spanish was always there, it was always around. I come from a military family, so we moved around a lot.
Okay. Yeah.
And so, like, the extended family, like my abuela, my tias, and all of that, who I probably would have spoken more Spanish with, we weren't around. It was kind of us surrounded by whoever we were living near at that time. So there was a little bit less of the Spanish all over. They did always tell us though, if you can't pronounce it, you can't eat it. So food was the
Oh.
language, like the food was the vocab that I always had down, and I can
Hmm.
order in any restaurant,
Me too.
so like it's fine. I can survive, but I always say, yeah, I'm a conversational intermediate Spanish speaker, but it's one of those things. If I could do anything, if I could change anything, I don't have many regrets, but I wish my Spanish was stronger for sure.
Yeah, me too sometimes. Because I think sometimes being children of immigrants, we're
Hmm.
very much like, okay, at least in this generation where we were from and stuff like that. My mom and my dad were like very much like, okay, well, we all live in America, so we're going to learn English, and
Sure.
and they were native speakers of English and stuff like that. When they spoke, they spoke with an accent. My dad less than my mom, so you could always tell. People are like, you have
Hmm.
an accent when I speak English, and they're like, yeah, mate, good luck guessing it. I'm from Florida.
Right, right, right.
I'm like, it could be from anything. Uh, but it was always very interesting because in when I was living in Miami, anyone that would come up to me would automatically talk to me in Spanish,
Yeah.
and then would talk to my husband who was blonde and green eyed in English. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
going, equivocado because
Yeah.
he is 100% American, but is a Spanish teacher with a master's in Spanish.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
So yeah, but now I'm living in Florida, in Orlando. I am like, where I miss my croquetas, and I think I miss the food mostly than anything. But we were very Americanized, and food though was very Latin in our household. And with own voices being a huge thing right now in the community and the industry, are you finding that your people are knocking on your door significantly more when it comes down to characters of Latino descent, at least?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting because I honestly think I was able to get into audiobook narration at the level I started at because of the movement towards own voices. I came in, I want to say it was book 3 of the Thornchapel series, taking over the role of Saint Sebastian, who is a Mexican-American character, who was previously narrated by Zach Weber, who does not identify as Latino at all. And he was the one that was really like, I've done these other 2 books, but I think it's important that we have somebody who actually identifies with this to take over the role. And so I like, you got to give props to him. I think I'm sure there were other people making this decision too. And Sierra was really great about welcoming me into the family and all of that. But I think I really kind of owe where I'm at to this push for authenticity, which I think is much needed. I think it's really important. Because, you wouldn't, I know I have opinions about that when I see it on screen, right? Like if you see somebody that is not Mexican at all playing a Mexican character, I do not like that. So like I think there is crossover with regards to how that plays out in audiobook narration too, because it has to, there's value in having people that belong to these communities give voice to these characters. So that is kind of how I got into it. And then I think it's been interesting because as I've done more work, I've gradually been able to do roles that aren't just Latino, which is kind of the goal, right? I'm an actor, I'm a performer. I want to be able to do as many things as possible. It's this weird sort of balancing act, right? To be able to be versatile, but also to be authentic, to make sure that, we can do multiple things and occupy these different spaces, but also make sure that the few spaces that are culturally specific are being respected as culturally specific, right? Like it sounds like a contradiction, but I don't think it really is. And so like, yeah, it has provided some opportunities, and I've been very glad to also kind of get opportunities outside of that space as well.
Yeah, I think that what I always love, I do love the fact that we're diversifying. And I love the fact that we're getting more on the own voices, regardless of cultural or communities and stuff like that. I do want that. What I'm trying to ensure too that happens is that people don't get then blocked in where Oscar Reyes can only play and voice characters of fill in the blank, background, because you don't speak with an accent. And I'm hearing of, you want to bust out with, my name is Billy and I'm from Texas. If you can bust out with that accent, by all means, go for it. Because there's been people, I think there was a conversation like, oh, someone from England would never be a cowboy. I'm like, they may not have the cowboy accent, but they might own a ranch in Texas because fill in the blank reasons.
Sure.
But also the stereotypicalness when it comes down to Latin characters of everyone being like Mexican and the accents being the same thing. I think a lot of production companies, especially now that if they do like Sirena does Spanish audiobooks, and they're always looking for more of that neutral Spanish, because unless the character is from, Tijuana, Mexico, it's going to be, or Buenos Aires, Argentina. It's going to be a difference. And that's where my grandmother's from, is Buenos Aires, Argentina. Sure. Yeah. I'm a mutt in that sense, because my dad was from Cuba. My mom was from Chile. And my grandmother, who moved in with us when I was 2, and she lived with us all our lives since then, was Argentinian. So certain words were always problematic.
Yeah, sure. Of course.
Yeah, because I'm sure you recall like one word in Mexico means totally different something in Puerto Rico. That means something totally in Chile and all these other countries. So it's always fun.
There are different words for different things.
Dialects are different. Yeah.
Straw,
Bug was another one.
There are a lot. I think pineapple has different words too. Like
Oh
there are a
yeah.
bunch that have like different words.
Yeah. And my
Um,
favorite's when people start getting into a fight over whether this specific dish
sure.
is if of this name or from that name. And I'm like, y'all realize that the only difference between this over here and that is that one uses black beans and the other one uses red beans.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everything else is the same.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So it's
It's funny.
hilarious.
And like I think it is interesting because there is this sort of impulse to lump us all together, but we are so different, right? If you talk about Latinidad, it's variety. It spans literally 2 continents and how many islands, right?
Yeah.
The idea that they would be the same is absolutely absurd. And then you look at something like England, and it's pretty easy to recognize like different dialects in the UK, which is a really small region by comparison, and to understand that there's different sounds and cultures from Scotland to
Yeah.
Ireland to London to the countryside, right? And if they are allowed to have that variety of sound and experience and all the rest, why can't a culture that spans X many countries have the same sort of acknowledgement? I don't know. It is definitely an interesting thing to kind of encounter.
Well, it is because heaven forbid that the character says they're from Worcestershire, England.
Sure.
But then they have a Cockney accent. And someone in the review will say something.
Yeah.
Or nowadays in our world of social media, there will be a TikTok.
Sure.
About that, because and someone will say something, but there's also, like I said, with books, they're like, oh yeah, or then when it's a generalized character in the sense of, well, yeah, if their background's Latin, and all of a sudden the character andale or say something, I'm like, we're not all Mexicans, right?
It's a thing.
Or Puerto Rican. It's always a fight between the two, which ones when it comes down to identifying.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, we're there's a lot more of us. And we're bad too. I'm like, heaven forbid, we spicy when you try, when you when you don't identify us correctly. I'm like, oh, you're from Colombia. Oh, do not tell someone from Nicaragua that.
It's 100% a thing. It
really is. Yeah. Well, I saw that in Miami because that was such an eclectic, melting pot. In Chicago, how was that in Chicago?
Yeah, Chicago actually has like a pretty massive population of Latina people. Like my family's from the southwest side of Chicago, so like Pilsen, Beckley Yards, which is primarily Mexican and Mexican American. But there's also a pretty big Puerto Rican community as well. So like those are kind of the big groups, Puerto Rico and Mexico. A lot of immigrants, obviously, so a lot of first-gen folks, but also, I mean, the communities have been there for almost as long as Chicago has been there. It's always part of the story. But I think nowadays we're getting a lot more immigrants coming from South America, because I think that's kind of just a trend that we're seeing everywhere. But yeah, so it is a little bit less probably mixing pot than some other parts, but there are definitely a lot of Latinos there.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, when I was growing up, it was a lot of the Cubans were in Miami, and then there's a couple of years there was more Puerto Rican. I mean, and then it ebbs and flows.
Yeah.
I'm like, just neutral Spanish. Know who's in the room because you don't want to say the wrong word for straw.
Right.
Because that can mean a completely different body part. But that even happens in like I was telling you, my mom being from Chile and everyone else, she was the only one. Everyone's from Argentina. That was the running joke that they found her in a basurero, in a garbage bag. The thing. Yeah, growing up in that family was so fun. But she told us a story how she came in at 16 into her house where she had cousins and stuff that are Argentinian, but they were living in Chile, so they came visiting. And then she comes in there all excited because pinche, which in Chile means I got a job.
Oh, yeah.
In Argentina, it means I had sex.
Different.
Difference and things like that. So, between dialects and even accents, it's something that I love seeing more of the diversity. And I'm glad that we're having the conversations, and I hope that we can continue to have open dialogue and conversations about how we can effectively represent everyone, but also never pigeonhole someone to something because of that either.
Yeah. And I mean, it's a sort of thing. One of the more recent books I did Salt Kiss by Sierra Simone. And it was a character that isn't specifically Latino at all. He's just this character and he's got a lot going on. But it was really exciting to get to do something that felt very free from any of the expectations that might come. Like, if you Google Oscar Reyes audiobook narration, I'm sure you can expect to find a lot of culturally specific stuff, but also there's a nice decent mix, and getting to do something like Saul Kiss and some of these other ones have been really, really cool to kind of not feel stuck.
Yeah.
So it has been a good thing, I think.
Mm-hmm. Well, as listeners, one of the things, and we're talking about the different dialects and the accents, what are some of the favorite accents for you to perform?
Yeah. So it's funny because one of my very first gigs as an actor entailed me doing a British accent. So like British was one of the first ones I ever got like paid to do. It was, a professional dialect. And then it was Irish, but I did a play in Chicago where I had to do a Scottish dialect for like 2.5 hours straight, like 8 shows a week. So that's always the one that kind of is like close to my heart. I'm a little bit of a nerd, I can't lie. So, me and my friends will play Dungeons and Dragons, and you make the character, you do the role playing, and like most of my characters will usually have some sort of accent just because it's fun. And I feel like Irish or Scottish are kind of like the go-tos. A lot of people will hear them and think that they're the same because,
Yeah.
it's an assumption that they're the same, but they're distinct because I spent a lot of time thinking about how they were different. But yeah, those are the fun ones. I do enjoy doing those.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if it makes you feel any better, there was a review that said, I don't believe that he did an accent at all because his Irish was so not correct. And it was Gary Furlong, who is Irish.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Sometimes people will say that, or like they'll
Yeah.
say that some people had a better British accent than actual British people in the same
Yes.
movie. And
Mhm.
you're like, everybody has an opinion.
Yeah, I
Everybody
know.
has an opinion.
Yeah, they're like assholes. Everybody has one.
Very much so.
So yeah. What about on the opposite scale? What are some of the more harder ones that you're like, nope, accents to perform for you?
Honestly, I get self-conscious about Spanish or Mexican accents. Just I think it's because like I don't want to fuck it up. As an actor, I've been on screen and I've played a number of undocumented immigrants and things like that because it's television and that's kind of what you have to deal with sometimes. And I have cousins and Theos and Theas who actually have accents or don't speak English. And once or twice they've been like, what accent was that? And I'm just like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. So honestly,
Oh.
I get more self-conscious when I end up doing that sort of thing. So anything that is a little bit more, I think there's a nice sort of, it feels less personal. There's like a little bit of a distance, a little bit less pressure to get it right when, as a Mexican American person, I'm doing a Scottish dialect. Most people are just impressed, as opposed to like, oh, you're Mexican American, you should be able to sound convincingly Mexican automatically. It's almost like the expectation that, oh, you should be fluent in Spanish automatically. There's just a little bit of extra pressure that gets me in my head.
Yeah.
I can't lie.
No, it's I hear you. It's the same thing with like, oh, when I've gotten some of the narrators say, hey, Viv, how would you say this in a Spanish accent? And I'm going, wrong girl. If you need an Argentinian accent or Chilean or Cuban, I can, in Spanish, I can provide that. But as far as English with an accent, I go, that was not what I grew up with. We were not allowed to have accents, speaking English. And the schools will get rid of it. But also because of the amount of English that we spoke and who was around. I also have a problem where put me in Texas for a couple of days or any place at all with an accent, and I end up picking it up really quickly.
Sure.
And so I've had to tell people, please don't get offended if I all of a sudden start talking like this a little bit. Or when I visit Savannah, Georgia, after a little while, I start talking like this, and it's like, oh God, Viv, stop.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think there is something very human about wanting to fit in wherever you are, right?
True.
Like, I think, we're changeable. And so I think there's something about the fact that like you find yourself in a situation and you kind of meld to match. Like, I think that is very natural.
Yeah, it's very human. I think it's very humanizing. But it's also like you just hear it, and some of these accents are very nice to hear. I think. Like I love the Irish and the Scottish accent, British accents too.
Yeah.
And a good nice southern drawl can be nice too.
Sure. Yeah, it's a thing.
It really is. With you doing a lot of the romances under, as Oscar, romance has so many subgenres, which I love because there's something for everybody. But is there a subgenre that you like to perform in?
I think I have the most fun when they're like rom-coms, like when there's a little bit of a comedic element. I feel like my natural personality probably aligns with that a little bit more. Doing the moody ones is always a blast too. Like I mentioned, I do have a little bit of a sad boy thing going, just in terms of some of the titles. I think at one point I had a conversation and there was a hashtag mentioned. Those are fun as well. I think it's really satisfying for like the emotional emo teenager that is still inside all of us. As an actor, Hamlet is kind of the dream. So there is something about these moody, emotional characters that are very lost in their own thoughts and what they should do, and the internal struggle that is very juicy and exciting to get to unpack. So I can't be mad about getting those opportunities. But yeah, the rom-com stuff is definitely a lot of fun. In my own personal life, I read a lot of horror. Like that's the sort of go-to genre that I enjoy as a reader. But I don't know if I haven't really done a lot of like supernatural or horror romance. I think that there is this sort of gothic subgenre there because I've done some like what's the word, shifter stuff, with like
TNR, paranormal,
the werewolves and stuff like that, so I've dabbled in that a little bit, but yeah, that's not a subgenre that I've done as much as I might think.
Okay.
But yeah.
Well, there's a huge growth right now of a lot of authors that I've chatted with on the show. I've asked them like the question of like, if there's another genre outside of romance that you would like to write in, which one would it be? And the number of folks that have bust out with horror is like, wow. It's really like okay, this would be fun if I was a psychologist.
I mean, it's so versatile, right? It's like it's got so many subgenres in and of itself. Like you could do whatever you want with it. And
so there has been, I think a lot of folks are starting to look into doing more horror romance and what does that look like, and not because dark romance is different than horror.
I would say so. Yes.
Yes, sometimes people think it's one and the same because the guy wore a mask. I'm like, no, that's that's not horror. Different genres. So if there's any other authors out there listening, he's interested in doing horror.
Yeah, I love it. It's my thing.
Yeah. What kind of scenes do you like to perform the best?
Scenes. Oh, yeah, that's a good question. In terms of scenes that I enjoy, I kind of like the ones that are dialogue between two characters, because once you get more than two, it gets hard. But like I do enjoy dialogue scenes between two, usually the ones that are kind of before the protagonists fall in love, where they're kind of like quipping back and forth,
the banter.
I love some banter. I love some good dialogue. I love the sort of Jane Eyre of it all. Not Jane Eyre, Jane Austen, where there's like just the little bit of conflict that kind of covers up the fact that the characters really feeling it for each other. Those are the ones that I like.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I love Jane Eyre.
Jane Eyre, Jane Austen, all the Janes.
All the Janes. No, but Jane Austen, it's back then it was just done differently.
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason why we're still reading those books, and they're so good. I love Jane Austen.
Yeah. Someone said to me like, "Oh, I don't like Pride and Prejudice," and I'm like, "Wait, but I thought one of your favorite tropes was like enemies to lovers."
Yeah, that's the invention of that trope.
Yeah.
I can't get it. Yeah, like if people say they don't like Pride and Prejudice, I'm like, what are you talking? Like, I don't understand it. What's not to like?
So you being a fan of Pride and Prejudice, here's going to see how good friends we're going to end up being or not. The movies / TV show adaptations. I think you know where I'm going, right?
Sure.
Are you more of a fan of the BBC production with Colin? What is it, Colin Firth?
Colin.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I think that was Colin Firth.
Yeah, I
Right?
think so. I think I'm gonna make sure that I'm not talking about the Irish guy instead of the British
That's
one.
Colin Farrell. I'm pretty sure.
Okay,
That's
see,
Colin
there you go.
Farrell. Yeah.
Thank you. So Colin Firth or the 2005 with Matthew McFadden and Keira Knightley.
So, I mean, the BBC version is iconic, right? Like you can't really argue with that. But the Keira Knightley, Joe Wright directed one, I love, and I think it hit me at the right time. I think it's like, what do I want to do? Do I want to eat something that is really well made and rich, like a big old meal, because that's the BBC version? Or do I want something that is like a little bit quicker, a little bit less thought out, but is just really satisfying in the moment? Then I have to go with the movie. It's a little bit more contained, so you can sit and watch it in a single sitting. I feel like it's a commitment to watch the series because
Yes.
obviously it's a mini series, so there's an economy of time to watching the movie, and I think it's really well done. And I do love the movie. I can't lie.
The cinematic of the movie, it's my favorite one.
Yeah.
That's so you're not gonna be like BFFs.
With the hands, like the way
Yes.
that they focuses on his
The
hands.
music.
And then you got she's on like the cliff, and it's just
Yes.
it's beautiful. It's so good.
I know the cinematic and the music, they was just iconic, and the little the looks that they gave each other, and that's where when I hear people say, "Oh, I don't like Pride and Prejudice," I'm going, "What?" Like I said, tropes are all there between enemies to lovers to families, dramas, and all this fun stuff. I'm like, it's pretty much there. But yeah, that's my favorite one too.
It's so good. It's so good.
I went down the rabbit hole with Matthew McFadden when that movie came out.
Yeah, he's great.
He is. I ended up getting a bunch of DVDs. Yes, DVDs. From Amazon UK and figuring out how to get my DVD to play UK
original one.
Yes,
yeah.
Original ones, because it didn't have it here. But then also BBC did an entire series of readaptations of Jane Austen's books. So so I kind of went down that rabbit hole too. As a girl that loves books, duh, it was gonna happen. Yeah. When you're not working, what do you do for fun?
I go to the movies a lot. I love the movies. I'm a big reader, so even though reading is work, I also read for pleasure. I listen to audiobooks for pleasure. Funnily enough, it's interesting because I started as a listener to audiobooks after I had already been doing the work, and I got into it because I was in a book club and I didn't want to like sit and read the book, and somebody was like, yeah, well, you can listen to it on an audiobook, and I was like, oh, can I? And it didn't click for me that I guess I literally do this for work and I can also appreciate it. So I started reading my book club books through audiobook. And the big thing is, since I'm a fast reader, it was hard at first because it felt really slow. And then I learned that you can just speed it up. So I'm flying through books. So I do that. I play games, like me and my friends, we play D&D or Magic or whatever, because we are a little bit on the nerdy side. Video games. Yeah, I try to work out and stuff, but that feels a little bit less fun and a little bit more maintenance, I guess. A little bit of a chore on that front. But yeah, I keep busy. My plate is generally full. I'm on a kickball league, so I play kickball. Yeah, and try to have a nice variety going on.
Nice. So being a reader and a lover of words and stuff, what is your favorite word? Separate from your favorite curse word, because that is your second part of the question.
My favorite word?
Yes.
Oh, that is a tough one. The first one that comes to mind is dumb, and I know why it's the first one that comes to mind, because it's been coming up a lot recently in work conversations that I've had. But the word vestigial is the first one that pops into my head. Vestigial as in like leftover. It's this something that remains after things have changed or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something very satisfying about the word vestigial. So I'm going to say that for that's the sort of thing that I think changes on the day and the mood.
Yeah.
Today, right now, vestigial.
Okay. So what about your favorite curse word?
My favorite curse word might be fuck.
Okay.
I think it's great, but I also love it as kind of like as a noun.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of calling someone a fuck is really funny and satisfying to me. Like, you fuck. Like, I think that's great.
Yeah. Well, I can I can use that word as a noun, pronoun, adjective. I'm like, you fucker, stop
It's so
fucking around.
versatile. You know, it's so like you
Yeah.
could use it however you need to.
Yeah.
I think it's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting how sometimes when people say, oh, I'm going to be someplace like a convention and things like that. And they're like, oh, but I won't know anybody. I'm like, listen, we all have one thing in common. If you're in a
Mm-hmm.
room, whether you're in a bookstore, if you're in a library, so we all like or love books. So it's always fun to kind of get to know you guys and find out that you're also D&D players.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like there's a little bit less shame, less vestigial shame than
Yes.
there was at one point because now it's a
Mm-hmm.
little bit more mainstream. Um,
Oh yeah, it's all over my feed thanks to
Baldur's Gate.
yeah,
Yeah. I play Baldur's Gate as well.
do
Yeah, I
oh
do. I do. I spend way too much time. I don't have the time to
mm-hmm.
spend playing Baldur's Gate that I somehow managed to spend playing Baldur's
Yeah,
Gate. I have no excuse, but
I know. Yeah, see, it's
great. It's a good game, dude.
it is okay, good because it's been all over my feed thanks to Asterion.
Uh-huh.
And
Uh-huh. Yeah.
and it's interesting too because I'm going, y'all are not gamers, but they're loving him as a character and a
Yeah.
romance interest. And I'm like,
Yeah.
it just needs to be done into a cartoon or a movie of some sort, an animation just to get it done. But I have a friend that's like, you'd like the game. I'm like, listen, I'm classic Mario Brothers kind of a girl, like straight up and down on the mushrooms and stuff like that. When it comes down to
Sure.
some of these games, it's very 3D-ish. Sometimes
Yeah.
I'm like, it's
Yeah.
like, where am I going? I would get lost, even though I'm the human GPS in my family.
It
But
is easy to get lost in some of those maps. I mean, they're literally dungeons and mazes. Like
yeah.
it's designed to be disorienting. Funnily enough, you are able to jump on mushrooms
Oh, okay.
in
See,
this
that might
game.
be that might be a fun thing.
You can
That
also like scale the game. Like it lets you pick how hard you want it to be. So you can play it on basically like easy mode.
okay.
If that's something that you're interested in. It will take over your life if you let
No.
it. Like
Yeah.
it's fun
See.
though. Like
Uh-huh.
you'll be jazzed about it, but then like it'll be the thing that you're thinking about.
Yeah, I'm gonna send you a
It's
note saying, Oscar, I'm on level 5.
it's like it's a thing. And I'm a very thorough game player, so you can move through and just like check the boxes, do what you need to do, and head
Mhm.
on. But this game is so rich and they have all of these little secret things hidden everywhere. And
Yeah.
so I'm like, well, I'm not moving on until I find everything,
Oh, yeah.
which
See.
means I'm spending a lot more time to not get as far, but my experience is richer for it. So yeah,
Yeah, I love it that you're such an enabler.
it's yeah, I'm a little enabler is exactly when it comes to Baldur's Gate,
Yep.
exactly what I am,
Okay, we'll have to
an
offline.
enabler.
Yeah, we're gonna have to offline that because again, I have a
Mm-hmm.
friend that she loves. She plays D&D, but she's also into
Mm-hmm.
the romance stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she showed me one thing, and my feed has been nothing but,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah,
you know,
yeah, that
and
tracks.
it does track, yes, but it's a good thing. I'm like, I wonder if he does audiobooks because my mind then goes straight into casting.
Yeah, I mean, he might like it's funny. I think there has to be some sort of crossover between video game voice actors and
Well, there's a
performers and
lot of
audiobook.
there's been a lot of narrators. Like I know Tara Langella does games and animation.
Mm-hmm.
Sean Kristen has done the same thing. Shane East under his real name has done stuff as
Mm-hmm.
well. So it can be very like similar paths as far as careers and stuff like that, and just jumping around and stuff for doing something different. I do know that Newborn actually has been doing the physical acting of the games because that's also fascinating how they do those tracks and with all the
Right.
dots in your face and acting out the lines. So
Right.
things I've learned. Thank you, internet. And romance and wanting to romancify a character that has nothing to do with it. I love it. I love my community. It's great. But speaking of games, did you do your homework about Two Truths and a Lie?
I did, yes.
Yay. So we're going to
Do
play the
have
fun
them here.
game. We're going to tell us 3 things about yourself and we're going to figure out which one's the lie. And I say we because I do really hope y'all that are listening are playing along.
Yeah.
Otherwise, awkward.
Yeah.
So whenever you're ready.
Okay. 1, I have 4 Halloween costumes prepared for this upcoming weekend. 2, I am a current PhD student. 3, I have spent over 100 hours playing a video game called Baldur's Gate.
That's the truth. But then again, it could just be see, this is where this game gets you. It's in
Sure.
the details. You could have 5 Halloween costumes ready for this weekend instead of 4.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's
You know what I
funny
mean?
because like I didn't really anticipate that Baldur's Gate would come up
Sorry.
outside of the 2 truths and a lie.
Mhm.
So that was one of my prepared. Well, sorry, truths. That was one of my prepared truths that I just didn't really anticipate being a little bit spoiled
Yeah.
prior.
But hey, it's just one of those where it could, like I said, it could be that you're a fan and it could be more than that 100 hours, right?
True.
So it's all that. So, but I want to say that's the truth.
Yeah, sorry.
It's okay. And again, it's on details. It could be that you're, instead of a PhD student, it could be that you're a master or not at all student. But yeah, okay. So which one's the lie? Oh,
Yeah, do I tell you? Is that
well, let me hold on. Let me see.
okay?
Okay.
How does the game work? I think
Well,
I already fumbled it once.
we gotta kind of have to figure it out. So okay, so the game is the truth. So the lie is between the 4 Halloween costumes or the PhD students. And I can't you're an actor. So no offense, but is the PhD students the lie?
It is not.
So you have like what, 3 costumes maybe for Halloween instead of, or
I
5?
have 3 costumes.
Okay.
I have 3 costumes. Yeah, I have 3 costumes.
Okay. So
Yeah.
PhD students, do you mind sharing in what? Because that's always fascinating for me.
Sure. Yeah, I'm actually getting my PhD in theater and performance studies.
Nice.
It's a lot of reading as well, as you can imagine, but not quite as fun as a romance novel or a horror novel or anything else. Honestly, it's just a lot of really dense reading about theory and philosophy, and it's all about ideas, which is interesting and compelling. Don't get me wrong, but it's also very challenging and exhausting. And whenever I feel like I can't go to sleep, do my
Oh my
homework, and I'm immediately unconscious, which makes it a lot harder to actually finish the homework. But
yeah. Well, no, PhD programs are no joke. And a lot of times people don't realize that they can still get a PhD in the arts or in that realm, but it's just going to be a lot more intensive. It's not just about where the lighting is going to be better.
Oh yeah, no.
You know?
I mean,
No.
yeah, it is not like that at all. It's funny because you hear theater and performance studies and you assume that it's about like plays, but it's not. It's not really. It's more about like human nature and why we do plays. It's very like it's for lack of a better term, academic. And so it's definitely interesting, and I made the choice to do the program for a number of reasons, but it's definitely something that it's a little bit, it's not for everybody, which you find out pretty soon. Yeah.
Well, they gotta weed throughout stuff, but again, people get fascinated and get into the loving of something, and then they're like, nah, it's okay, I'm good. Either they've learned enough or they've realized it's not for them, and there's no shame in that either. I think that sometimes we are, at least in my generation, was very much like, you have to go to school, you have to get a degree, and blah blah blah. And I'm
Same.
like, not everyone is meant to or wanna
Yeah.
do a 4-year degree, let alone continue, because you can't get a PhD without getting a master's.
True.
So you gotta have to go in.
Yep, that is true.
I have a friend that it's like, I'm like, you're a lifelong student. I think he's finalizing his almost 2nd PhD, and I'm like, dude.
Oh wow, yeah.
But he's a learner. He's a Renaissance man for sure. But yeah, that's huge. You're gonna have to keep us posted on when you graduate. We'll have a nice little salutes and maybe play some Baldur's Gate.
It's a couple years away at this point for sure, but I look forward to that day.
Yay, cool. So the Halloween costumes, can you talk to us about that? Because I'm just curious.
Yeah, so one of them is actually from Baldur's Gate. God, I'm gonna sound like such a nerd after this.
I love it though.
Comes out. And one is Astarion from Baldur's Gate. I do have an Astarion costume. And then the other is a from a cartoon. Korra, the Legend of Korra, which is like it's like the sequel series to Avatar: The Last Airbender. So I got a costume from that show, and it's funny because like the SAG strike is going on, like the SAG-AFTRA strike, and we received information that we shouldn't do Halloween costumes from struck companies. So luckily cartoons and video games are outside of that purview. So it's like, okay, perfect. And then the other one, I think, is just like a werewolf, just like a wolf ears and stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like your standard Wolfman-esque Halloween costume.
Yeah. So I'm assuming the 3 costumes are 3 different events, or just like outfit changes in between.
3 different events. Yeah.
Okay.
I love Halloween, but like I wouldn't change mid-day. Like I don't think
I have a friend that loves it
me.
too and does costume changes.
Yeah. They're location-based costumes for sure.
Yeah. Heaven forbid too that you wear the exact same costume to do different events and locations.
Exactly. To me, and it's like, because they're also different days, because over the course of the weekend, and it's like I wouldn't wear the same outfit 2 days in a row. Why would I wear the same costume 2 days in a row?
It's also, it's dressed up. It's fun.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun putting it together. It's kind of my Halloween tradition. I'll watch like Hocus Pocus while I assemble whatever costume I'm gonna be wearing out.
Mm-hmm.
That's my little Halloween treat to myself.
Nice. Yes, Hocus Pocus is on my list. I have that and Practical Magic. Trying to debate if I'm going to add the second Hocus Pocus movie to it or not, but I don't know.
Have you seen it yet?
I have seen it.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I know exactly what you mean. I know exactly what you mean. It did not make my list, so I get it.
Yeah. I'm like, I mean, I just got
Practical Magic's so good. I love Practical Magic.
Yeah, it is. I just literally got I just finished adopting a kitten from
nice.
Orlando Cat Cafe. And
cool.
All black cats, all black. And it's my first boy, because usually my cats have always been girls.
Oh, okay.
And so going down the names, and I'm like, Binks, Thackeray Binks.
There you go.
And I'm like, yeah, kind of a little basic there, but it just works for him.
It's fitting,
It's fitting, especially as much as I love the whole genre and the whole like witchy side of things. It's totally fitting for Viviana to have Binks.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Oh, goodness. Well, that was fun. I love having those conversations and things like that. Before we go, can you tell us what you're currently working on and what is coming up next for you?
Yeah. So I guess some of the recent titles that I have done are parts of series, like larger series. So I did Salt Kiss, which is one of the books in the Lioness trilogy from Sierra Simone that is still in progress. So that's probably going to be something that will be coming out as time goes on and projects get finished and put together. I did a book that's part of the Vengeful Gods Motorcycle Club series. So I did like the first 2, and I think there's at least one more that's still on the horizon there. And then I recently signed on to do a book. I don't know if it was announced, so I don't know if, I feel like I'm allowed to say, but If She Says Yes by Tasha L. Harrison. Looks like that's probably going to be getting recorded over the course of the next couple of months as well. So yeah, Those are the ones that are like, in the down the highway, so to speak.
Yeah. Vengeful Gods Motorcycles. Gotta love it.
Yeah.
The MCs.
The motorcycle clubs, the different motorcycle clubs are always a hoot,
Yeah. Matter of thoughts. My dad used to ride a motorcycle. He was part of the club. Yeah. And I'm like thinking of it now as I go, yeah, none of them look like this.
No, absolutely not. I have an uncle that was in a motorcycle club, and he is not looking like that, man.
No, none of them were. None of them were. Yep. Even then now when they have my brother, who also rides a bike, goes down to Daytona Beach and stuff. We have those bike weeks there, and I always fuck with him, and I'm like, Candy, take a couple of photos. Like, man, what the fuck, fool? And I'm like, I just want to make sure that none of them look like the books. And sure enough,
they don't. They really, really don't.
They really don't.
But you got to have the illusion, right? You got to have that fantasy.
Exactly. Oh goodness, yeah. Thank you so much for taking the time to hang out with me. It's been such a pleasure to chat with you.
Yeah, this was great. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. If you're not following him on social media, which you've gotten better at some stuff.
I'm trying.
You're trying.
I'm trying. It's hard.
I know. Trust me. As someone that works with it all the time, it's hard. I get it. But I will be including all of your, his links on the main landing page for this episode over at Viviana Enchantress of Books, so you guys can follow him. And until next time, happy listenings.
Thank you to all of our Audiobook Lovin Podcast Patreon. The Audiobook Lovin Podcast has special Patreon access levels. Join today to receive benefits including early access to episodes, shout-outs, special exclusive content, and much more. Support the podcast by becoming a Patreon at www.patreon.com/Audiobook Lovin. We thank you for your support.
Thank you for joining us on the Audiobook Lovin Podcast, hosted by Viviana, Enchantress of Books. For links and more information discussed in today's episode, previous podcasts, or the Audiobook Lovin Series, please visit our website, vivianaenchantressofbooks.com. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a positive review wherever you listen to our podcast. Until next time, happy listening.